Welcome back to Talking Dragon Age, the show where I talk about Dragon Age. Today we're recapping some theories about the Qunari. First things first, we have to talk about the difference between a Qunari and a Kossith. Kossith is not the name of this race. According to writers who have since been let go because EA, Kossith is the word used to describe the culture that predated the Qun, and may not have been the name of a race at all. So this thing is not a Kossith. Even Bull says he doesn't expect the Kossith look like the Qunari. All we know about them is that they occupy a land up north and maybe east. My theory is the Kossith did not approve of the Qun, and were too powerful for the Qunari to conquer, so they were either exiled or the Qunari fled south to Thedas, where they first conquered Parvalan. However, ogres come from Qunari broodmothers, and they have been around since the first Blight. This is because the Kossith had a settlement down in the Qunari wilds. Now, that's weird. If the Kossith came from north or east, how did they get to the south of Thedas? Well, we don't know how big their continent is, or how far they've expanded, so it's possible, though unlikely, that they went around the far side of the globe and came north from the South Pole. But I somehow doubt that. We do know of a land over to the east called Amaranth. It's supposedly a paradise, but the Thedosian expeditions there have pretty much all ended horribly. Maybe Amaranth is connected to the Kossith homeland, and that's how they got to Ferelden? But again, why settle in the Qunari wilds? What was there that made it worth it? Well, could have been some elven stuff they were studying, especially if I'm correct about Arlathan having been in the Frostback Mountains, or Lake Calenhead. But the Alamari were still here around that time. I'm spending too long talking about this, it's just weird. Anyway, a couple of things about the Qunari as a race. Kieran says their blood doesn't belong to them. Cole says their horns are dragon horns. The Iron Bull talks about how something in the dragon they killed spoke to him. And most importantly, Corypheus says their blood is engorged with decay, and that their race is not a race, but a mistake. How does Corypheus know that? Could be he got that knowledge from somewhere else after his adventure in the Black City, but my theory is he knew of them from before. I think ancient Tevinter took some Kossith captive and experimented on them to create perfect slaves. Qunari usually turn savage without the Qun. Bull says they needed it to stay civilized, and Solas says their savagery is only held in check by the rigid Qun. And this connects with what Bull says about dragons being powerful, but all uncontrolled. Qunari need something to serve because they were created to serve. How did Tevinter accomplish this? Well, it could have been with Gillenon's Pool of Nightmares, but who knows. What's more interesting than that is how some of their new creations became broodmothers, but there had to be enough of them left to return to their homeland in order to later create the Qun and come back to Thedas in huge numbers. Anyway, let's talk about where they're at now. They're invading Tevinter, but according to the novels and comics, their military is acting without support from the rest of the Qun. That's honestly very strange, especially since the conflict has been going on for several years at this point in the timeline. If Sten is the new Arishok, it's just weird. By the way, I freaking love that Sten calls Alistair Basilit An. It took Hawke 2/3 of the game to earn that title. Alistair was mainly a goofy sidekick, but Sten recognizes his prowess and his heart. So yeah, invasion of Tevinter. The Ben Hasrath are still fighting Fen'Harel. The Vidasala's plot in Trespasser was odd. She had a ton of resources, and a bull loyal to the Qun readily sides with her. But there's a lot that doesn't add up that leads us to wonder whether or not the Qun at large actually sanctioned her actions. But now, there is one character that I believe is manipulating the Qunari. Rasan. Rasan is in line to become the next Arakun, which is the leader of the Qunari priesthood. In one story of Tevinter Nights, it's noted that she and her men are not acting like Qunari typically would. Also, she refers to her men as her Antam. One of her responsibilities is advising the Arishok on the will of the Qun. But as established in another Tevinter Nights story, The Antam are not acting in accordance with the Qun and without support from the rest of the Qunari. My theory is that Rasan is either manipulating everybody, hoping to gain more power for herself, possibly believing it's what's best for the Qun, even though she's specifically not supposed to do that, or the invasion is actually some kind of distraction, so she can keep doing her work against Solas. I don't know how or why, but the truth is, a lot of the actions the Qunari have taken since Trespasser seem, at a glance, dumb or out of character. Why are they acting this way? Manipulation is my best theory. Desperation is another, but desperation also sometimes looks like stupidity. Also, as per 3 Trees to Midnight and 8 Little Talons, the Qunari may be planning to shift focus to invading Ravane and Antiva. See, that's another questionable decision. If they stayed in Tevinter, that's all they need to worry about. They start going elsewhere, and they'll have to deal with all of Thedas coming together to stop them. They lucked out with Kirkwall not starting a war, but now it's unavoidable. So, I guess that's about it. Let's recap. The Qunari and Kossith are not the same thing. I theorize the Qunari were a Tevinter experiment gone wrong, and it may have involved the Elves, but I hope not. The Qunari are currently divided, which one of the points of the Qun is to prevent exactly that. So, I think they're being manipulated, specifically by Rasan. They're probably going to attack Ravane and Antiva, which is a tactical mistake in my opinion. I really want to talk to Sten and see what he's thinking. So that's it for now, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to comment and like, and remember, Tala Nadas.